Greetings, friends, and welcome to another episode of The Mistake Zone, your weekly dose of our lives and the mistakes within them. My name is Jaren Wade. Joining me, as always, one of my best friends in the whole wide world, Matt Alba. Hey, Matt.
Yo.
How are you doing?
Yo, I'm doing good, choom.
Matt,
Hey.
we said it last week. I don't think we even have time for our pre-show banter. We don't have time to check in with Splatoon. A beefy week here in the Mistake Zone because we're actually, talking about anime, but this time, unlike, 2022's Anime of the Year, Kakagurui Twin, we're not separating this into two parts. Just a one-shot, Matt. The OVA, we're here to discuss the new Netflix anime, Cyberpunk Edgerunners. And Matt, I enjoyed my time with the 10-episode run. I really enjoyed the characters, and I honestly think that I had a greater appreciation for it just because I played through, finished, and spent over 120 hours within Cyberpunk 2077. And I know, Matt, when I go into a new piece of media that has, say, source material, whether it be a movie, it's usually a movie, a game, sequel, possibly a spin-off. I always ask around, I always look, hey, do I need to partake in the source material to fully enjoy this? And Matt, I really do think that having that basis from my experience with Cyberpunk 2077 just made this so much more enjoyable. But enough about me. Matt, 10 episodes later, how are you feeling about Cyberpunk Edgerunners?
I think that Cyberpunk Edgerunners is probably one of my favorite anime that's been done recently. I don't know. I mean, I think that's very colored by the recency bias, but I really, just like you, really did enjoy my time with Edgerunners, and it really makes me want to play Cyberpunk. And apparently that also happened to a lot of other people because it has recently it's recently overtaken Witcher 3's peak player count record for CD Projekt Red's games.
On Steam, yep. I saw that this week as well, Matt. Everyone has that cyberpunk fever, and I think it's well earned just because as a whole, Cyberpunk Edgerunners is a really enjoyable experience. I know when we kind of get into the episode by episode breakdown, I think my biggest gripe with with the 10 episodes overall is I do think the last third is notably weaker than the first. I want to say that by episode 7-ish, it starts to kind of fall off and then succumb to the classic, tropes for the cyberpunk genre as a whole, or really any piece of media or storytelling that revolves around, cybernetics, AI, the synthesis. And you kind of have to tell those type of stories, the tried and true cyberpunk story of, okay, what is your sense of stealth versus all your cybernetic enhancements? And you do have to tell that story for a wider audience. But by the end of the 10 episode run, I do think that I wish these sort of told a different story just because, again, I feel like every piece of cyberpunk material that I have consumed in the last decade or so has played around with the idea of, oh, who am I in this body that isn't my organic body, And even to a degree, that was a point rampant around Cyberpunk 2077. So I think for me personally, I do feel like it did fall off towards the end, mostly just because it honestly does. By episode 7, after the mini time skip, so to say, I do think it goes 0 to 100, especially when it comes to David, the protagonist's enhancements. And I think that's where kind of my issues stem from. I was wondering before we get into it, Matt, as a whole, do you think it stayed consistent throughout the 10 episodes, or did you personally feel like there was a dip at some point?
I thought it was pretty consistent throughout all 10 episodes. I understand why people say that the last third of the show is probably the weakest, but I really enjoyed the last third of the show because I kind of like seeing the downfall of David.
Yes.
But I think that's just like me as a person, because I don't know how you feel about this, Sharon, but do you like kind of sad or monotone-ish or like kind of bummerish endings to media? Because I feel like, quickly hit on that ending, that this story doesn't continue anymore, at least in my opinion.
I think let's get into it, Matt.
Hmm.
I honestly do think by the time episode 10 rolls around, I was honestly thinking, how does David not die by the end of episode 10? Just
Hmm.
because again, it hits upon all the different cyberpunk tropes of the genre where okay, he's more metal than man.
Hmm.
He crossed the line that you don't cross because you can never go back there.
Uh-huh.
Especially the whole notion of David essentially being a walking Hulkbuster mech machine by the end of it, where it's only his torso left. Like,
Yeah.
you don't go back from that. You can't live a life with Lucy. When that happens, I fully expected him to die. And I know there was only one thing that started to subvert those expectations. It is when they rolled up on the Arasaka Tower. And I thought, oh, wait, Arasaka plays a big role in the Cyberpunk 2077 game. And this whole idea of them having this mind AI prism, that's where, you break out Johnny Silverhand, or that's essentially Johnny's whole story in Cyberpunk 2077, him wanting to destroy this AI kind of prison system that they developed. Of
Hmm.
course, correct me if I'm wrong, but if David doesn't die, and I guess we don't know if there's going to be a season 2 or if David and Lucy's stories continue, even though it does seem kind of pretty definitive by the end with Adam Smasher shooting him in the head. But if they were to continue this story, I would say it has to revolve around that AI mind prism where they do take, you know, David to me is one of their extreme kind of figures where they would totally download his mind into a chip, sort of similar to what Johnny did. And maybe he's one of the first who goes through this program. And that's the only way I see this story continuing. And I wasn't sure if you also had that feeling, Matt, or did you think by the end of it, Lucy, or at least David's story is done by the end of Cyberpunk Edgerunners?
I think David's story is done. I don't think it would have made any sense for them to put David into the mind prison, because I thought there was nothing in particular special about David other than his resistance to cyberpsychosis, right?
Yes.
So I don't, unless they think that cyberpsychosis is a mental only thing, I don't see a reason for them to have ever put him in, or even get the opportunity to put him in, I guess, which is like the really important thing. Unless Adam Smasher
Right.
didn't actually kill him, and I feel like if that was the way it went out, I feel like that'd be a huge cop out.
Yeah, just because the way it's framed, Matt, if there's one thing that Cyberpunk Edgerunners has taught me is heads explode
Uh huh.
pretty graphically. And
Hmm.
I feel like when Adam Smasher did shoot David at the end, we did get a clear image of his head exploding.
Hmm.
So, but yeah, I feel like this is the end of David's story at the very least. And to me, I feel for Lucy, I don't really know where she moves on or how you can present her as a character with. I guess you can do anything with, a character like Lucy, but at the same time, her story feels like pretty definitive as well, with her
Hmm.
finally achieving her dream on the moon and seeing visions of David, where I don't think Lucy can be, she might be a side character. I would hope to see her somewhere in the Cyberpunk 2077 DLC, but if they are going to continue with Edge Runners, and I would really hope they would, I do hope it is more so a Tales from Night City where each season focuses on, another character with their own trials and tribulations while still exploring how kind of just depressing Night City is as a whole. And I think that is my overall want, just because if there's one thing that I really appreciated about Edge Runners is how much it fleshes out Cyber or Night City as a whole and
Hmm.
really illustrates all these different concepts that were essentially reduced to menus in 2077. Case in point, one of my favorite aspects of the anime was just seeing how all these different mods and implants get installed. Because Matt,
Mm-hmm.
when David gets a lot of his implants, it's brutal.
Uh
And when
huh.
you kind of contrast that to what we see in 2077, it's what we press A at a vendor, we open up a menu, and we press A to install what we want.
Mm-hmm.
So just seeing game mechanics actually fleshed out and have actual, stakes attached to it and visuals makes me really appreciate it more than I think I would have if I was just watching this as an anime only viewer. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Matt, how are you feeling about kind of the future of the Edgerunners series and I guess the transition from game to this anime world?
As far as the future of the Edgerunner series goes, I kind of agree with you. I kind of hope that it is kind of just a Tales in Night City sort of thing, like you were saying. As far as like Lucy herself goes, I really hope that, just for lack of a better word here, in season two, that she fills more of a role of maybe mentor or maybe kind of like a secondary character in whoever's story the next season is. Kind of like how Rogue was in the Cyberpunk game, like in her portion,
Yeah.
where you're kind of just she's kind of mostly in the background giving you missions most of the time, and you slowly flesh out her story for like, I don't know, I'd say like a small percentage of that game, and then it concludes, and then it continues on with V's story. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Do you think, I guess, a future anime season, do you think it can run parallel to the 2077 story? Just because I feel like this is, of course, with the appearance of Adam Smasher and just all the little references to not only the real world brands, but fixers themselves, that,
Mm-hmm.
this does take place before 2077. It is, technically a prequel. Again, Matt, the moment they showed Adam Smasher, I immediately thought, okay, David's probably going to die here, just because Adam still appears in 2077. And honestly, Matt, before we continue on, what I appreciate about, you know, Edgerunner's use of characters established in 2077 is the fact that I loved how Adam Smasher was portrayed in this anime.
Uh
I
huh.
think he was one of the strongest parts of episode 10, mostly because we got to see his brutality. We got to see his skills at work. Because honestly, Matt, the only thing I remember from the Adam Smasher boss encounter in 2077 is the fact that I just repeatedly quick hacked him and then jumped at him and slashed him with a katana as a character with no melee points at all.
Uh huh.
And the fact that it's such a he's such a big presence in 2077 when you do get to see him. You're told about how dangerous he is, but when you actually fight him, you know, you're a superhero at that point. Like
Yeah.
it didn't really phase me. And to see just how brutal he was, of course, Edge Runners as a whole was just super brutal, but to see him at work, to see him, not only go toe to toe with David, who at this point is just this hulking monster, and to swat him away without really a sweat
Mm-hmm.
makes me appreciate what edge runners can do to the source material. And yeah, Matt, did you have any thoughts on Adam Smasher's appearance here?
Yeah, I really liked Adam Smasher. Just the way they introduced him of just always being in that room with those two
Yeah,
Arasaka corpos. That was like a nice
yeah,
introduction to Adam Smasher. Like the really, I think like quick mention of him towards the start. I think in like episode 2 or 3, it was like very early in the series. And the way that like he did fight David, like going into just I guess the boss fight in 2077, you went through 2077 as a net runner, right?
yeah, more or less.
Yeah, I think I don't know if how the other gameplay styles like dealt with it, but I feel like going up against Adam Smasher as a net runner really messes with how good of a character or how like difficult of a boss fight Adam Smasher could be,
Yes, definitely.
just because of how I think strong the net runner stuff was in Cyberpunk, because it really is just like a control type of gameplay, and to make it so that you do the Atom Smasher boss fight, you can't take away, I guess, a player's main playstyle.
Yep.
Yeah, like playing it as a netrunner, I think really, really hurts the just overall Atom Smasher fight just because of how much you can lock him down as well.
Right, for sure. And I do like how that's sort of addressed within the Atom Smasher fight scene in episode 10, just
Uh
with
huh.
Lucy trying to quick hack him as well and him essentially swatting her away. I think that
Hmm.
was really well done as well, just to again show how powerful he is, but likewise shows how much special V is as well by the end of her or his journey in 2077. But Matt,
Hmm.
speaking about Lucy, speaking about David, how did you feel about those two as the protagonists of Edgerunner?
I thought they were fine protagonists. I don't think that there was anything, I guess, compared to any other protagonist, that there was anything more special than them
Yeah.
or like lacking from them. I thought they were like good protagonists. I thought both of them had like good character arcs, and they both contributed to the overall story and kind of like the. I like that they were used to kind of flesh out more of the background of how net running initially worked and how the old net used to work,
Yes.
or how the old net currently works. Because I don't know about you, but like I had a really weird time conceptualizing the old net when I was playing through 2077.
No, I definitely agree with that.
Yeah, because you really only touch upon the old net about like halfway through that game, and I feel like you don't do much with it. But with how much they kind of like use Lucy as a conduit to explain how the old net works and why basically there's no real internet inside of the cyberpunk universe, even though it is so technologically advanced. Like I kind of liked how all of that came together with Lucy and David.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. Just because with Lucy's backstory, they did it in such a well, they were able to visualize net running that I never really got when I was playing through
Uh-huh.
2077. And to see her and her, all the other Arasaka kids, traverse the old net and to see them, attacked by rogue AIs and malware, things that were said in passing in
Hmm.
2077. And of course, there were sections here and there when you were actually not running. But I think, again, Edgerunners is able to use its anime medium to really showcase how brutal, how really horrifying this whole thing can be. So that's what I really did appreciate about Lucy and her net running skills because it did allow the audience to see a different side of or of how hacking works, or at least net running hacking works in Cyberpunk
Hmm.
2077. But looping back around to Lucy and David as a whole, Matt, I think the reason why I really didn't like them as characters was because, to be honest, I think when you compare them to V, they're okay. So, Matt, by the end of Cyberpunk
Hmm.
2077, heck, even halfway through 2077, just because it's a video game and it has mechanics that you can build toward, a skill tree that you
Uh-huh.
can build towards, you're essentially invincible in that game. The only real reason you're dying or getting hurt is because of different story beats, but for the most part, V's just a
Uh-huh.
badass. you know I played as a female V, and she was honestly, she was this no nonsense, doesn't take crap from anyone. She felt established. And when you contrast that to Lucy and David, who are more or less still they're like still teenagers at least. Let's say 18, just at least 18, because of
Uh-huh.
course anime. And it's the fact that them as a pair feel more vulnerable than V ever did through during my playthrough of Cyberpunk 2077, where to me, V is a badass with a death wish mission of her and Johnny going on and fighting the world. In contrast to V's macro story, you have Lucy and David's kind of tale that is so micro. They are just a bunch of street kids trying to
Hmm.
figure it out, and all they have is each other. And that vulnerability really made me not only appreciate them more, but just because of their characters, we get to see how, you know, horrible, how desperate Night City is, and how hostile it is, where it will eat you up if you're not careful. And for the most part, Matt David, his backstory, anime cliche. Lucy's backstory, anime
Hmm.
cliche. These are tried and true character types that we're used to in
Uh-huh.
anime. And yet, when you put that with Night City in the background, I think it really elevates them just to show how ruthless the city is. And I think that's what I really appreciated about them, where they were vulnerable. They did bring out that teenage romance side of things. And it really made you root for them. And as we see David start to deteriorate, for him to succumb to the same issues that his father figure Maine did, it was really heartbreaking just to see them eventually have to depart because, again, these are essentially all these two had. And I don't know, Matt. I really like those two as characters. It might be me in a honeymoon
Hmm.
period, just because it's so fresh in my mind. But to see those type of characters presented within Night City just shows you how gruesome and brutal it can
Hmm.
all be. Uh, in contrasted to V, like I don't know about you, Matt, but I played V as someone untouchable. I just rolled up, quick hacked everything, walked out, and to see just all and for the most part, I tried to play non-lethal in Cyberpunk 2077. Just and then to see essentially kids with guns blasting, people around them, heads exploding. I think that made it really more
Hmm.
impactful to me. But yeah, Matt, in terms of Edge Runners, are there any kind of aspects that really stood out to you that you said, "Wow, this is something I want to talk about"?
I think after just watching episode one as a whole, it made me really, really excited that we planned to talk about Edgerunners.
Yeah,
Just because I thought episode one was such a good introduction of all the concepts and kind of the feeling that you get in a cyberpunk backdrop, I guess. I'm not really sure what word to use here. Within the cyberpunk
right.
genre, like just that the all of the tech, because like even in the first like 10 minutes, they go through, I guess, the importance of cyberpsychosis. They go through BDs. I believe they do a little bit of hacking. I can't remember. I think it was unclear because I'm pretty sure. What's the name of the SWAT teams in this?
Oh, I don't know. I just associate it with the NCPD, but we'll just say SWAT for.
Yeah, yeah. Well, for the SWAT team, like they very quickly did a hacking thing. It's kind of hard to like tell if you don't really know what's going on. You kind of just see their eyes glow, and which I think is the same for any of the other hacker or net runners in the game. But like,
Right.
okay, I actually have a question for you, Jen. Did you watch this subbed or dubbed?
I watched this subbed.
Okay,
I didn't know there was a dubbed version, to be honest.
the dubbed version for this actually I think is better than the subbed version.
Really?
Yeah,
So you're telling me I need to rewatch Edge Runners, which I'll happily rewatch Edge Runners.
I think it's worth rewatching. I initially watched it subbed, and then well, when I was going through for my notes run, I was watching it dubbed, and I think the dubbed actually really is a lot better for watching the show, just because you get to experience a lot of the, I guess, slang that gets thrown out. I feel like the
Right.
slang and the feeling doesn't come off as well when you're just reading it through subtitles. Like to
Okay.
actually have people say, "Oh yeah, give me them eddies," give me like, "Yo, choom, what's going on?" Or just someone calling somebody a corpo. I don't
Right.
know, something about that just really, really made this anime hit for me.
So okay, that's definitely something I want to go back through.
Yeah, and even just like the kind of subtle things, because this is taking place. Night City is in, I think, California or something, somewhere there, like somewhere more towards like the southern part of the states, and I don't know, just actually having accents to go off
Oh, okay.
of
Right. Right.
like David's mom speaking with kind of like a sort of Spanish inflection, putting in some Spanish words in there, or like I think in particular just having the Ripper Doc talking in a Jamaican accent really added to his character instead of just the usual. Jared, when I heard the Ripper Doc in Japanese, I'm like, of course it's the Demon Lord retry guy. Like that voice I feel is so iconic, and
Yeah,
honestly,
for
I'm glad
sure.
he's in there. But like just having, I don't know, having Jamaican Ripper Doc really for some reason, Jared, really made sense to me.
I think
But
actually you do bring up a good point, Matt, just because when now you're right. I think I will check out the dubbed version just because thinking about the subbed version with everyone speaking in Japanese, I think this kind of adds to my weird, mental thing about Edgerunners where I do think it is a lot more, well, duh, with all the Japanese voices, it does feel a lot more Japanese influenced. But
mhm,
you're right, Night City is kind of a parallel to West Coast, as you said, Southern California feeling where it is this multicultural melting pot. And to see all these different, you know, ethnicities, people of varying backgrounds come together in, like, again, this hopeless city really speaks to the fact that Night City can get everyone. And when you do have, to me at least, I think this goes back to my whole, oh, I do think that the anime version is a lot more Japanese influenced. And maybe that is because I was watching with Japanese voices. So it was really hard for me to separate the two. And yeah,
mhm,
I am really curious to see since when I do think of my play, I was going to say that the overall aesthetic, not necessarily aesthetic, but the vibe really did feel different than 2077 just because, with 2077, you do feel that Californian West Coast vibe. But again,
mhm.
watching through Edgerunners, you do feel the Japanese influence there through the voices. So I think when I was telling you throughout my watch how, oh, I do want to play Cyberpunk, but I want to play Edgerunner Cyberpunk. I think to me that
Mhm.
was, oh, I just want to play weeby Japanese Cyberpunk at that point. But no, I totally see where you're coming from in regards to that, and that really makes me want to kind of watch it dubbed again. But Matt, I guess we should just, to continue off your thought, but I guess we can go through each of the episodes now and kind of just pick
Mhm.
apart what we thought was really great about them. We'll start with episode 1, Let You Down. Matt, gotta read the synopsis to refresh our memories.
Uh-huh.
Uh, After a night of streaming illegal brain dance, David wakes up to reality, a rundown apartment with a broken washing machine and an overworked mother. Matt, with episode 1, again, I said it before, it was your tried and true. Oh, here's David, who is the street kid who has nothing really going for him, and his single mother, where she's putting in all the sacrifices for him to achieve a dream that she had for him. But again, Matt, it was, I think, your typical kid from the ghetto storyline, which is fine for me, but I think the clear star of this episode was the introduction. I was honestly surprised at the cyber psycho scene in the beginning. Again, just how gruesome it was. I think that really was a statement piece for the show as a whole of saying, "Hey, this is going to be fucked, Matt,"
Mhm.
and I really appreciated that because it did set the tone overall.
Uh-huh.
But Matt, I know you said to me you really enjoyed this episode just because it took a lot of the different cyberpunk, aspects or specific world building points and made it digestible for the casual viewer. Do you have any more thoughts on that as well?
Yeah, like just to continue adding to that, like I think the opening montage where David's leaving his apartment to go to school the first time, just that dude in his car getting mugged, people kind of just vomiting everywhere. The people that were kind of just like having what do you call it, like BD sex in
In
like
public, yeah.
on the side of the road. Yeah, like just all of everything that was like being set up by that, showing trauma team kind of going towards that burning building, and then later even more trauma team after the car crash, and also even leading into the car crash, just the kind of like gang violence that's going on openly on the roads. And the I think the thing that like kind of hit the kind of like hopelessness of Night City the most to me was right after the car crash, the trauma team saying, "Hey, these people aren't our
Yeah, they're not
clients. Just
insured,
leave them."
yeah.
Yeah, and then the double hit, I think, right after of they're in the clinic, and he just goes, "Oh yeah, visitation's not a part of your package." I think that was like one of the wilder, like more memorable lines to me from episode 1.
Matt, just seeing how David hits rock bottom so fast in this episode. I think,
Mm-hmm.
again, when you were kind of describing, just David walking around and seeing all these negative aspects that surround David, and David not even flinching really shows kind of
Mm-hmm.
his character. And again, it's such a common trope, but having, David's not necessarily happy go lucky, but his mother trying to be that positive, light in his life. Again,
Mm-hmm.
but as you kind of listed off, you don't get that light in Night City. And
Uh-huh.
it just showed it was a really good introduction to this world. And, you know, Cyberpunk as a whole is deeply rooted in, class, whether it be monetary
Uh-huh.
or, even this notion of, oh, you're mostly organic. I have the better cyberware. Even in the
Mm-hmm.
bully scene where David is getting beaten up by his classmate just because his classmate has that kung fu cybernetic enhancement installed.
Mm-hmm.
Like it really did a great job, not only just showing all these different concepts from what a psycho is, what a brain dance is, but also just how miserable everything in Night City can be as well, mixed in with the fact that that beginning was so brutal. But again, Matt, as a cyberpunk player, I really do appreciate that it starts off with a cyber psycho attack, and then we get to
Mm-hmm.
see the transition of, okay, that cyber psycho went insane because of the Sandy modifier, and by the end we have David asking the Ripper Doc to install it into him as well. And it's just that contrast of, okay, it starts off with a cyber psycho attack, and then it ends with a kid who is at rock bottom asking to have that same, mod installed within him. And it is this vicious cycle that really does,
Mm-hmm.
in retrospect, foreshadow what we are about to watch in the next 10 episodes. But again, Matt,
Yeah.
love this as a, you know, introduction to Edgerunners and kind of cyberpunk as a whole. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, Matt, I know after I watched this episode, I said for last week's episode, man, let's just talk about episode one. Let's cut to it. But Matt, you had to, hold me down and say, no, I got to save it here. But that's how much of an impression it left on me.
Mm-hmm.
So that brings us to episode two, Like a Boy. With his new enhanced body, David heads to the academy seeking revenge on his bully. Later, he meets a mysterious woman who wants to recruit him. Matt, we
Mm-hmm.
get introduced to Lucy. And honestly, my first impression of Lucy, well, I know we did get a glimpse of her in episode one, but Matt, I hate to
Mm-hmm.
say it, Lucy has that girl next door, that best friend anime haircut where she's never
Uh-huh.
chosen by the protagonist. Of course, Lucy is our female lead in this, but that's immediately the first thing I noticed her. Not necessarily digging the hairstyle, but again, going back to David and Lucy as a pair, I really do like how both of them are designed. But
Mm-hmm.
Matt, I
Mm-hmm.
have to once again illustrate how I really loved the Ripper Doc scene in the beginning, just how
Yeah.
gruesome it makes installations. Once again, in comparison to how they're just menu selections in the game. But
Mm-hmm.
again, this is where I feel like the tried and true cyberpunk story trait of, hey, you need to watch out for these modifications, just because get too much and you might lose yourself. And in the world of cyberpunk, losing yourself is succumbing to cyberpsychosis, is,
Mm-hmm.
linked to losing your mind. But Matt, I do like how many times cyberpsychosis was mentioned, tying the hardware back to the introduction of episode one, Lucy calling Dee a psycho, and even the doc's breakdown of it as a whole. I know it really you have to tell these things to the audience. You have to hit the audience over the head with this, just because they might not. Again, this is for a more casual, not necessarily everyone will be playing Cyberpunk 2077, but I really do
Yeah.
appreciate how in your face everyone kind of alludes to how David might be going in over his head, especially with this Sandy mod. But Matt, when you think of
Mhm.
episode 2, what comes to your mind?
I think just like you, I think the most memorable scene for me in episode 2 is that opening
Yeah.
scene. The initial talk with David and the Ripper Doc, the Ripper Doc changing his arms to me was such a impactful scene for
Yes.
me. I don't know why, but I thought that was such a cool scene. And then the gruesomeness of installing the Sindevastant for the first time. I also actually wonder. I think maybe just like quickly touching back upon that idea of Tales of Night City
Yeah.
again. Like if they do make a Tales from Night City, I would kind of want them to make a story that's not about a street kid. Maybe a story about a corpo, or maybe a story about what's the rate, the not the race, but like the starting for the people who are outside of the city in the cars. Do you remember the name of them?
Honestly, that was where that was the origin story I chose, but it's slipping my mind right now.
No.
Oh wait, it's Nomad. It's Nomad. It was Nomad, Street Kid, and Corpo. I believe are the
Yeah,
three
yeah, Nomad,
three
Nomad.
origins.
Yeah, like I think I would really like the if they make a next one to make it more about a nomad or a corpo, because I want to see if they do the Ripper Doc scene different. Because I'd like to see, I guess in particular corpo, to see if the corpo install is less gruesome than a street kid install.
Or do you think with a corpo install, it's just a lot of automation at that point? Because I know when you do go to the financial district of 2077, they do have more higher, doctors of more prestige, of higher reputation. My
Hmm.
mistake. But yeah, I'm really curious to see how that gets handled differently. Or on the flip
Yeah.
side, even if they don't dedicate an entire series to um this to like a character, but I would love to like a one off that just strictly follows a Ripper Doc, maybe depending on where in the different social classes he belongs to or they belong to, just to see what he deals with in between, higher paying customers, or even, people down on their luck, and just to kind of see their mindset within this world as well is something definitely I want to see as well.
Oh, that's actually a really interesting idea. Like just following a different job.
Yeah.
It would be cool to maybe like see like a Ripper Doc, or like a Fixer's like point of view on Night City, or like Trauma Team, or the SWAT force that we can't remember the name of.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
like,
Yeah, and I think maybe that's what I want to see out of Tales from kind of sort of similar to say like a What If from the Marvel
hmm
side, just 10 episodes. Each episode deals with a particular, either job or a one-off character, just to see, daily lives of a Night City
hmm
citizen is definitely something I would want to
hmm
see from a sequel as well.
yeah, I also like that really cathartic scene of David beating the shit out of Katsuo, just punching him so hard.
Yeah.
His dad kind of just watching the CCTV video, which I thought was a bit of a cop out or a misdirect. I thought that was going to be the plot line of Cyberpunk,
Right.
or of Edgerunners. So for them to kind of just make Tanaka kind of a small arc in the story, I thought that was like a good play. Like later on in the episode.
No, definitely. It kind of subverts your expectations of where this kind of series is going,
Mm-hmm.
which I really did appreciate. I was actually surprised that we don't see, Kid Tanaka show up again.
Uh huh. And I think like one of the things that I want to touch on like really quickly as well is the Lucy picksocketing scene. Because Jaren,
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think it's so wild that there isn't a cover on like your neck to make sure that doesn't happen. And it also makes me wonder how rare like a net runner or kind of that type of person is if there isn't that much precaution against them. But
Oh, that's definitely a good point. And yeah, I never caught that when I was
yeah.
watching it, where how is no one noticing that a chip within their neck is being, yanked out of
Uh
them?
huh.
But actually, speaking about Lucy, Matt,
hmm
I loved the Lucy apartment scene and the moon brain dance
Yes.
towards the end of the episode. Again, it shows kind of how vulnerable these two kids can be, especially to one another,
hmm
where they're sharing something so intimate. And again, this is in contrast to all of the gruesome, like not only the petty street crimes, but just the overall violence that we've been seeing from the series until this point.
Uh huh.
Honestly, this whole scene was really this really reminded me of Judy's final mission with V and Judy kind of swimming underwater to explore
Mm-hmm.
her essentially
Mm-hmm.
hometown. And, I love the notion that despite Night City being so fucking grim, you do have these pockets of hopes and dreams. But Matt,
Mm-hmm.
I have to admit, I felt a bit uneasy during the brain dance just because through all this happening, I thought, so does Lucy either die or betray David?
Yeah.
And lo and behold, the ending
Mm-hmm.
happens. But again, Matt, what did you think of the moon brain dance scene?
Yeah, the whole moon breakdancing. Okay, Jared, I don't know if it's just me being too normal of a person, but to go into, I don't know, someone's house that you just met who you know is like a criminal, and then you're gonna go like brain dance with them for a while. Like I thought that was the most sketchy thing, and I'm like, okay, something bad is gonna happen to David before the end of this episode. Before the end of this episode happens, and like you said, lo and behold, it did, and he gets like caught up with the rest of the gang, but it
Yeah,
also just made me like really, really want brain dance tech until
man.
episode 6 or so when that goes crazy.
Honestly, Matt, I do know where you're coming from about kind of, how naive David is. But once again, though, I just, put that towards, okay, he has nowhere to go. He's lost his family. This is the first person he can seemingly trust,
Hmm.
after losing it all. And Matt,
Yeah,
he's a teenage
yeah,
boy. Lucy's a pretty girl, of course, of
yeah,
course.
yeah, 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 yeah. That's true.
But yeah, overall, a good episode. And man, Matt, when the episode ends with a gun in David's face, pit in my stomach, Matt. And then this brings us to episode 3, Smooth Criminal.
Hmm.
Surrounded by a group of rowdy Edgerunners, David makes a plea to join their team. Meanwhile, sinister forces plot to lure him back to Arasaka Academy. Matt,
Hmm.
David joins the Edgerunners. The whole conflict at the end works
Uh
out
huh.
because it always works
Uh huh.
out. It's an
Uh huh.
anime. But Matt, before we get into the episode, what were your initial thoughts of, the main edge running crew?
I liked the main edge running crew. I think the only person in the crew that I didn't really have strong feelings towards was Dorio, because I feel like she didn't contribute much to, I guess, the overall, or she had the least impact, I guess,
Yes.
of all the other characters. Like in this episode, what you meet like Pilar, who I think is like a good funny character. Obviously, Maine is a very important character. Like you'll get introduced to like Rebecca, Kiwi. Like I think all of the crew are all actually like pretty well done.
Yeah. But I do know where you're coming from when it comes to Dorio, just because as much as I feel like she could be a really strong character on her own, I don't know about
Hmm.
you, but it felt to me that at points she was kind of reduced to Maine's handler, other than being possibly another mother figure to David, which I thought was
Hmm.
kind of weird. Where of course David finds a new family within this edge running gang. He has his father figure, the little sister type in Rebecca. You have that skeezy older brother in Plier. Even Kiwi. I think towards the end, Kiwi does play that estranged mother character to a degree. But yeah, I feel like Dorio. I felt like I wish they gave her a bit more, other than just being kind of the rock that held Maine down, if that kind of makes sense.
Hmm.
But Matt,
Hmm.
David joins the crew, and what did you think of the heist scene? David's first real job with the gang. Because honestly, Matt, I had to rewind it a few times because between all the different subtitle placements, bottom of the screen, the calls, which also work as subtitles, and then the mixture of like stylized text on the screen as well, it was like a visual overload to me that I couldn't keep up with.
Oh, Jaren, I loved all the subtitles being everywhere. I think episode 3 is my favorite episode in the
Oh,
series.
really? Okay.
Yeah, like just the introduction of all the characters, the like you said, the initial heist. I think that episode 1 obviously is the introduction towards, I guess, Cyberpunk as a whole.
Yeah.
But I think that episode 3 is the one where they're like but now here's what you're really in for.
Right.
Because now you're going into the kind of like heist, you're cloning chips. I think you mentioned this to me as well when we were kind of just like talking on Discord through this, but the intensity that came in during the scene where David and Lucy are in the limo and the subtitles from Maine just go crazy, and it's like, oh, it's time to learn, like, and I don't know, like the way that they just did all the subtitles, the way they did all the talking, just really, really, really hit hard for me. You're getting chased down the highway. He's integrating the Sandy into his driving. The gruesomeness of that truck kill.
Yeah,
Jaren, everything about this episode was like so Cyberpunk, and the introduction of, I think, internalized weapons within the show, because
right.
I think they didn't do too much in the opening scene, did they?
You kind of saw it with the Cyber Psycho a bit, with his arm blades coming out as well. But no, I definitely made note of that. That one of my favorite parts about episode 3 in particular was seeing all the different melee builds, especially in their garage fight scene, you know, where you had Maine's fists, you had the arm blades, you had Lucy with her, I don't know what they're called.
The monowire.
Yeah. And just seeing all that come together, again, Matt, I did love this episode a lot, just because, as you said, it really establishes what the cyberpunk universe is, especially when it comes to the actual cyberpunk, the gang aspect of it, and what it takes to actually run with, you know, this crowd of people. I also like that we got introduced to the concept of a fixer with Faraday. Who offers his job to look for Tanaka. But yeah, Matt, again, great episode, really action packed, and I love, again, it just establishes what it means to kind of make it in this world. But Matt, have to note, Lucy just had to drop an ara ara like during this episode. Man. Like, I'm really curious to go, you know, watch the dubbed version just to see what she says. But when she dropped that, I had to pause, write a note, because of course you have to, man. Of course you have to, with the big sister type character in this. But Matt, great episode. Yep, that motorcycle highway death was brutal. But I think if there was one episode that I would go back to rewatch, it would be Smooth Criminal, definitely.
And like, Jaren, just to like quickly touch back on something I said earlier about the Ripper Doc having that one voice actor in the Japanese version, Jaren, of course, Faraday in the English dub is Giancarlo Esposito. Like, that voice is just so iconic. Matt, I need to watch the dubbed version now. You're legit selling me on rewatching this. I'm actually really excited to. The dub is so good. The dub's really, really good.
Matt, speaking of really good, this brings us to episode 4, Lucky You. Eager to learn the edge running ropes, David pesters Maine for another mission. Instead, Maine tasks Lucy with training him. Again, Matt, I feel like with episode 4 as well, it was just introduction to introduction of all these different, you know, not only cyberpunk kind of references and different, you know, just world building items, but as someone who spent 120 hours or more in that game, just to see all the different skills being used, all the different, you know, locations, just seeing the Afterlife Club, the camera hacking interface, to see Rogue in the background. Matt, with the first major job from the game being referenced, you know, the one that was shown in the debut trailer when they're going through that apartment complex to get the girl who's in the ice bath. Like, again, just to see all these little references to 2077 from the Maelstrom hideout and that exchange room, you know, kind of to be paralleled with David and the crew. Matt, I loved it so much. But one thing, again, stood out to me, and it is that, you know, Edgerunners is able to show you just a more graphic version of, you know, what we normally see in 2077 that was just essentially menus and quick camera cuts. Matt, have to say, I was kind of thrown off by how essentially the introduction to net running with Lucy in the bathtub and how erotic that looked. Like, you don't see that in the game. again, I'm amazed at how Edgerunners turns the mundane in game to more gruesome or erotic, when it is showing. But Matt,
Mm-hmm.
I think one of my favorite parts about this episode was essentially the father son talk between David and Maine, and how, again, it cuts to how David is growing, how he's going on these different jobs with them, how he's learning more. But when it finally gets to the touchy subject about how David and his relationship with Lucy, I loved when David dropped, I just don't know how much of it was real, in reference to the moon brain dance, and how that was used to transition between this scene of David and Plier in the brain dance club, to David, again, talking to Maine about Lucy and her dream. And Matt, chef kiss. I love that scene.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Matt, Dave gets more gnarly implants, and we do see, unfortunately, the demise of Pilar to another cyber psycho.
Mm-hmm.
And then the show kind of ends with David's first kill. But Matt, what did you think of Lucky You overall?
I enjoyed Lucky You. Like just touching back on the talk between David and Maine, kind of that whole kind of montage. I forgot to mention this earlier, but the montage bit reminded me of it. It's just how good all of the background music in this show is. Like,
Yes.
I loved all the use of the music in this show, especially during the montages, especially that moon scene from episode 2 when they're just playing that one song that, oh god, Jared, that song is so good. Just to play it at the start of the series, and then that's your closing song in episode 10. Jared, come on, so good.
So
oh
good,
man,
Matt.
Jared, that's classic 2019 like anime chef kiss, like of the week moments. Like four was so good. I thought the fight was like very well done.
Yeah.
The kind of anticipation of waiting for that opening scene to show up again throughout the story, and then you just seeing Pilar talking to this random dude peeing on a can, and you're like, oh, well, this is about to go sideways real quick.
Of course.
I don't know. Everything about that was just so good.
Man, Matt, I think for me, again, I have, as much as I love, that opening montage, the father-son talk between Maine and David, I think the star to me was just all of the interaction with David and Lucy, especially that rooftop scene. Maybe because it's more, essentially their relationship is more the vibe of anime that I enjoy. But I think there's something about David and Lucy's teenage love story that adds a different level of stakes compared to, the story that was presented in 2077.
Mm-hmm.
As I said before, in 2077, you're this badass with a rampant AI in your head. I feel like there's a different level of vulnerability being presented in Edgerunners. Essentially, in 2077, V is a badass with nothing to lose. In Edgerunners, I'm witnessing David, who has not only is he a lot more vulnerable overall, but to all of a sudden have so many stakes in front of him after losing so much. I don't know. I loved it, Matt.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like in 2077, V seemed untouchable in a way where with David, especially throughout episode 4, and at the end, I feel like he's one wrong step from everything blowing up. And yet that teenage innocence is such a great contrast to how essentially a toilet Night City is. And I don't know, Matt. I feel like with V is the exception to the rule, but with David and even Lucy to a degree, it feels like they're just another citizen in Night City, dealt another bad hand like everyone else. And Matt, I don't know, I loved those two in this episode.
And speaking of just like the pairing, I also just want to go and talk about the fact that I think this is the episode that sets up the kind of dynamic between David and Rebecca.
Right.
I can't remember which scene happened first, but David saving Rebecca from, what are the name of the...
Oh, the Maelstrom gang? Yeah.
Yeah, the Maelstrom guys. David sneaking Rebecca into Afterlife. And just the scene of when David visits their apartment and it's just instantly a gun in the face, and Rebecca's just chill about it.
Yeah.
Jaren, this is setting Rebecca up to be such a good character that you're just like, oh no, she's gonna die.
Matt, I loved Rebecca and David's relationship. Again, kind of moving ahead of ourselves, especially in the later half of the season, for Rebecca to essentially, up until I forget which episode it is, I think episode 9 or 10, Rebecca is kind of this outlandish, in your face, 100 all the time character. And I loved how she takes a kind of bigger role towards the end. And she is a lot more self-serious. She's looking out for David, even at points where she's trying to flirt with him as well, even though she fully knows he's with Lucy. I think all that really, everything we see from Rebecca kind of just leads up to her actually showing genuine care for David towards the end, and she really does capture that little sister role really well, and I'm really glad that she ended up being included in Cyberpunk and Edgerunners. But yeah, Matt, kind of moving along now, just because we still have a bit more season to get through. Episode 5, All Eyes on Me. David makes a clever suggestion when the team strategizes for their next mission. However, he soon learns that their target can't be underestimated. Matt, again, we have a lot of different 2077 references, the Delamain reference. But honestly, I feel like this episode in particular, we start to kind of set up our main goal of what it is for Cyberpunk. A lot of of Edgerunners, just because a lot of the different characters we've been introduced are now starting to tie together, and we do kind of have we do have Tanaka being an important figure towards the rest of the crew. But yeah, Matt, this was the episode that I think was I think tonally this was really different compared to the rest of the season, just because at points this felt like more psychological horror than in your face, action anime. But what did you think of All Eyes on Me?
I think for me, I think that episode 5 was probably the weakest in the series. Not that it was a bad episode. I just think that while it does set up the start of the rest of the plot line for Edgerunners, it in itself didn't do too much. Like, I feel like JK's stuff was interesting, but like it was almost like a self-contained story that like I think you could have like taken it out and you don't lose anything towards the overall plot, which I think doesn't apply to any of the other episodes.
No, I totally agree where you're coming from, Matt.
Yeah, like I do agree though that like it was kind of a horror thing with the whole brain dance kind of. Would you call this like a torture scene through brain dance?
I would definitely see this was a torture scene where in another, again, Matt, to me, All Eyes on Me is one of the episodes I would expect in that Tales of Night City spin-off anime, where we are dealing with, I feel like JK would be a central figure of him being this renowned brain dance snuff film director. And the way he's getting such, potent footage is because he's kidnapping and torturing his victims. And I do agree, Matt, with the sentiment that a lot of what was gained from this episode is things that was established in previous episodes, because the main points of this episode are it further establishes the Maine and David father-son relationship, which was established last episode. Again, JK's, warnings to David about, you have the Sandy with you, you're one step away from cyberpsychosis. How much can your mind take? Those are, again, common cyberpunk tropes overall for the genre, but tropes in the series that have been explored already, where I do agree, Matt, where nothing necessarily new is gained. And I feel like this was kind of a flex for the most part, because, the Tanaka stuff comes to, we see the conclusion of the Tanaka story specifically in the next episode. And I feel like episode 5 kind of just prolonged everything, if that makes sense.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, but yeah, Matt, the only thing I really liked was we got to see the hacking minigame interface with Lucy trying to short circuit the drones.
Yep.
Um, but again, it was just a lot of different references to, the dilemma within David. Even when David calls JK a fucking psychopath, again, we're playing with this imagery of David is just one bad day away from becoming a cyber psycho, which again, Matt, is a concept that's explored constantly throughout the series. So yeah, I do agree that it is a weaker episode, but I feel like in another world, this is definitely something that kind of would make me excited about a Tales from Night City, just because, yeah, I do think it would be a JK standalone episode would be great.
Hmm. Hmm.
And this brings us to episode 6, Girl on Fire. Maine doesn't seem to be himself, but the team has bigger fish to fry. They must race against time to extract vital information from their prisoner. Aside from episode 3, Matt, I honestly do think episode 6 is probably the strongest episode within the whole series.
Yeah, I agree.
In terms of kind of an action in your face standpoint, I do think that is episode 3. But from a purely story driven perspective and just a production standpoint, I do think episode 6 is probably the strongest
Hmm.
in terms of the story it's trying to tell. And I think just overall quality, because man, Matt, this episode is a doozy. And the fact that, it starts off, you hear, that Night City DJ in the beginning, at least for me, the Japanese equivalent, it really establishes, okay, I'm in Night City. But Matt,
Hmm.
Maine goes, we finally see it. Maine succumbs to the cyber psychosis. It is their job with Tanaka that goes awry, and it is a really character defining moment, not just for David, but Lucy as well. But Matt,
Hmm.
overall, what did you think of Girl on Fire?
I think that, like, I agree with that. This is like probably in terms of story the most important and like best episode in the series.
Yeah,
I feel like this episode has the most art style shifts throughout the series.
yeah,
Like two in particular that stick out to me are, I think, just before Maine dies, like his full red kind of blood covered
yeah,
art style, and the, I think, I guess series iconic piece right at the end when David kind of just looks shell shocked. He's holding like Maine's arm, and the one tear goes down his face. Like,
yes.
I think both of those like art style changes were so good and are like very, I guess, poignant towards what the whole series is, as if like that hasn't really been established already.
Matt, episode 6 overall was just such a beautiful episode with a lot of foreshadowing, scene transitions, and I guess, the playing of the of running imagery. Again, Matt, I love that scene you were talking about, how David's eye twitching, but then a tear rolls down it. Again, playing
Hmm.
with the line between being able to control yourself and cyber psychosis. But I think to me, this episode, what spoke to me the most was kind of, again, Matt, I keep going back to it, the relationship between David and Lucy, and kind of how much they rely on each other. All their exchanges of, tell me I can do this. And then seeing the quick glimpses of Lucy's past and then her recent reliance on David, I think it just showed how much more. Again, I keep saying how vulnerable these characters are, but this was, in full force this episode, just because they're dealing with loss, they're dealing with such high stakes, and for them to kind of process everything when essentially their family is dying around them was crazy, Matt.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think one of my favorite transitions was that one scene where David is about to puncture Tanaka with the chrome, but then that transitions to Dorio administering it to Main instead.
Hmm.
A lot happens. There's a lot of inward crew fighting. I was actually surprised by the end as well because, of course, David turns. He has his cyber psychosis, but by the end of the episode, he, for the most part, seems in a state of control, in a state of yeah, in a state of bliss before he ultimately knows he's about to perish.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something that I don't think we've really seen in the Cyberpunk, not only Edgerunners, but the game itself, where my understanding of cyberpsychosis is once you turn, that's it. You've turned. So
Yeah.
I was kind of surprised to see Main be Main by the end of it. And in the beginning, we saw Main's bitterness that the Sandy should have been his. And then towards the end, he has this empathy for David. He wants David to keep running. So I don't know, Matt. It was kind of crazy that, aside from Becca and Kiwi, the whole crew was mostly dead by the end of the 60% mark of the series.
Yeah.
But I think by the end of the episode, I did have my precautions, I guess, just because I thought of course, the rest of the series would be focused on Faraday, Arasaka, and Lucy origin related, which ultimately it was. But I think this marks the kind of tonal shift that I was most scared of, just because, as cool as the corporate espionage, how ruthless, it takes to survive in Night City is, that's not what I'm really into. Like, I want to see the street kids struggle. I want to see how they come up. And when finally go up against Arasaka, I feel like, okay, you're in a whole nother league now. This is what V deals with. So I think that's where the show kind of loses a bit of mystique for me. And it died when, Main and Dorio died as well. Another thing I wanted to call out was when Lucy was net running, again, back to that, style change. I love kind of the 2D side scrolling imagery that they used of her kind of running around. And I'm curious to see if we'd ever see something like that in game. But yeah, Matt, overall, really strong episode. Again, I think the best episode of the series, but I think this is where you have to have this episode. I think we all saw it coming, but it does transition into episode 7 stronger. Now an all-star edge runner, enhanced with more cybernetics, David leads his team into a new mission. An old contact reaches out to him for a big job. Matt, we have a mini time jump here.
Yes.
There's been some time, and we get introduced to the new and quote-unquote improved David. Matt, this gave me Enzo and Big Buff Enzo from Reboot vibes. And what did you think of Buff David?
I like the Buff David, like them debuting his arms, and I think also the kind of debuting of Rebecca having Pilar's arms.
Yeah,
I thought that was like a good touch as well. I don't know. I like Buff David. Buff David is basically, I think, how I was portraying my V when I was playing 2077.
Right. Okay. But yeah, Matt, we got, Wakako mentioned. I think, does she talk in this episode, or is it the next?
Oh, yeah,
I'm pretty sure she talks in this episode. Yeah.
Yeah.
But Matt, so we have this episode again with grown Enzo. We're doing another Maelstrom raid. Matt, during the raid, Kiwi says too many of them for quick hacks. Matt, I don't know what Kiwi was doing. All she needed to do was equip Contagion, and she would have wiped out that whole room.
Yeah.
But
maybe
Matt,
she didn't have that one equipped.
Or bear with me, Matt. Maybe the Edgerunners world is more optimized, where it can support a lot more enemy NPCs on screen. Matt, I didn't mention this during, I think, episode 3 or 2, but when David drives for the first time, I immediately thought, oh, this is definitely a Cyberpunk game, because he can't control the car, and neither could I. But Matt, David fully chromed out. We learned about the Atom Smasher. Yeah, this is where we learn about the Atom Smasher legend. But yeah, we also get introduced to Julio.
Yeah, Julio.
And Matt, aside from Cyberpunk for a minute, what do you think of, that kind of trope where you introduce a throwaway character who's overeager, yet in over their heads, that rookie character who is introduced just to die?
I like it. I always think it's a good goof to see how they're going to kill off this character. I
Yeah.
wasn't actually sure at the start if he was going to be that goof character or if
Hmm.
he was going to be like David's David in the way that like David was David for Maine. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? I
Yeah,
wasn't
for
sure like
sure.
what role he was going to be filling, but like still being the comedic death. I thought that was fine.
Yeah. But Matt, again,
Mhm.
we are reintroduced to Faraday, and I really do appreciate his conversation with David, just because there were two choice lines for me in their exchange. One,
Mhm.
Faraday says, "It seems you're more steel than bone," and then two, when he was talking about Maine, his flaw was personal attachment, where again, it's all cyclical here in Edgerunners, where we are seeing main story being repeated in David, even though David's trying his best, he thinks he's special.
Mhm.
But again, Matt, I loved the Lucy and David scene when they're out in the desert. That really gave me the same home stretch vibes as V talking to Johnny before heading into the end game of 2077.
Mhm.
I loved how the relationship dynamic between David and Lucy, what they have now after the kind of the mini time skip, which hits hard, especially after David said that he keeps his private and his professional lives separate. So in here this is the episode where we are introduced to the old net. We're introduced to Lucy's origin of her being kind of raised to be net runners, and my choice line from her this episode was, "If we're gonna die, why not die trying to escape?"
Mhm.
Again, showing how bleak her backstory is.
Mhm.
But Matt,
Mhm.
it was this episode that I fully realized that this is definitely a studio trigger production, mostly because there's this one scene where Lucy's face is, facing directly to the camera,
Uh-huh.
and she practically looks like white-haired Ichigo from Darling in the Franxx. But
What?
Matt,
Uh-huh.
um, uh, at the end of Lucy kind of going through her backstory, she says, "When I came to, I was living out in a junkyard." The amount of similar parallels, in Edgerunners to kind of 2077, whether it be, references to Easter eggs, it was really kind of wild to me. Where do you think its use of callbacks to the actual game itself is cool to see as a video game player, or do you think it was kind of distracting at points?
I like that. Like I like being able to just see an area in Night City.
Yeah.
Like even if it's just
Yeah.
a background or even like the stuff that you're talking about, like where they're just talking about kind of references towards like, oh yeah, like they're waking up in a junkyard or whatever. Just to see that area and be like, oh hey, I remember this place. I don't know. I think
Yeah.
it's a nice like touch. Like I really like that they decided to, instead of just draw out new places, they
Yeah.
decided to actually pick locations in the game and then animate there. Like I thought that was really good.
Yeah, I really liked it. But again, Matt,
Hmm.
speaking of parallels, we see David's arm twitching.
Yep.
We have Lucy call David out saying, "You haven't changed at all, still living someone else's dream." But yeah, again, Matt, I did like episode 7, but again, it did, signify that, okay, we are in the home stretch now. This is the story that they're telling. For a
Hmm.
kid that, was so hesitant about having implants, to see him fully chromed out, and just to see him change and continuing to see the hints of cyberpsychosis. Yeah,
Hmm.
I think this is where I I don't want to say I started to fall off, but I knew that this was a story that I was less interested in experiencing compared to what was being told previously.
Uh,
But was there anything out of episode 7 that, you wanted to mention?
I think like just towards that last thing you said about wanting to experience the show, like I think this is where it made me really want to, or made me really invested into the show, just because I
Yeah,
wanted to see how they're going to make David fall
right,
towards like the end of this. And like I think at this point I was also still curious about if Lucy would die as well.
right. And with that, this brings us to episode 8, Stay. Faraday finds himself stuck between Arasaka and Militek. Lucy and Rebecca confront David about his change in behavior, but he refuses to listen. Matt,
Hmm.
This episode starts off strong with the quote unquote cheap sob story about this single mother wanting to leave early,
Yep.
hard ass boss on her case, and then David blacking out for a second and showing signs of cyberpsychosis.
Mm-hmm.
Matt, what did you think of the introduction to Stay, and what did you think of where David was at currently in this story?
I understand why the introduction was there, but like I don't know, I just didn't like the introduction for it. Like making David
Right.
do an innocent person kill. I understand like in terms of story why it had to happen, but I was kind of like I kind of wish like it was different. But
Yeah, because I know they don't properly address it. I know. Well, he says it. Tells Lucy, I think, towards the end of this episode, where, hey, I killed an innocent woman.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like maybe it's because his mind's getting scrambled. He's trying to fight off cyberpsychosis, but I don't know. I feel like he doesn't. Okay, Matt, he gets his repercussions for doing that, but
Yeah.
at the same time, I feel like he doesn't. Where, yeah, like, I know this sounds silly, Matt, where it is just an anime, but the fact that David essentially kills an innocent really soured me. I know it is just to show how far he's gone or how far he's falling,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, I don't know, Matt. Maybe for me, it's because when I kind of play these games, I kind of play with, that street honor where,
Yeah.
don't kill innocents, only try to do who deserve it. And for him to black out, and I know it's to emphasize, oh man, he might become a cyber psycho soon. I don't know. I felt like that whole introduction was kind of, that's why I said quote unquote cheap, just because that was purely for the story parallel between him and his own mother.
Yeah.
But Matt,
Mm-hmm.
we got to go with the references once again. Regina Jones spotted in the fixer list being reviewed by the Arasaka Countermeasures Committee or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I love when Faraday meets him, meets the contact. He says, "The world's greatest corporation conducting illicit business at a diner." Nice callback to V meeting with Takamura in 2077 once again.
I think in that same diner as well.
Yeah, which is
Yeah.
crazy. We get that call between Kiwi and Lucy as well. But Matt,
Mm-hmm.
I think the scene that sticks out to me was when, David and Co are on another job, and David once again pulls out the gun, aims it at the guy's head, and then he sees flashes of that single mother, freezes in the battle just a bit, and then Rebecca comes to save him. Matt,
Mm-hmm.
Rebecca's shotgun juggle with her
God.
just blasting a guy,
So good.
so good.
So good.
But Matt, this was the episode where we got to see another side of Rebecca with David and Rebecca's walk, where I love the banter between these two characters, but also how the camera doesn't focus on them two walking; it is just them kind of walking to a montage of different scenery where
Mm-hmm.
you really do have to focus on what is being said. But Matt,
Mm-hmm.
once again, it is Rebecca saying, I don't want to see you end up like that. Really like this moment because of the vulnerability from Rebecca, who has been, again, I said before, pretty much 100 every time we've seen her. And that really made the show so much better for me.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
again, Matt,
Uh-huh.
David has kind of like another nightmare where Lucy wakes up and sees him just staring at a picture of his mother. And then it looks like that the side effects are catching up to him. He has another talk with the Ripper Doctor. He once again sort of blacks out, kind of is acting all aggressive. And Matt,
Mm-hmm.
I love this Ripper Doc scene since it encapsulates how hopeless Night City is and how it will eat you alive sooner or later. The fact that David has Lucy but also seems to be on the brink of losing her makes it more heart-wrenching to me. David is still there, but pretty much for most of this Ripper Doctor scene, he's not. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, Matt. I think between his walk with Rebecca, but also this Ripper Doctor scene, I think those are the two most important scenes of episode 8.
Yeah, I agree.
It's a tried and true cyberpunk story of what it means to be human in a world of implants. Just to see I know it was a cheap introduction, but just to see how much that affects David and how much it also pushes him towards cyberpsychosis was done
Hmm.
really great. The show ends up with essentially a David and Lucy breakup scene
Yeah.
for the most part, uh, which was a really nice exchange between the both of them. But I feel like after the Ripper Doc scene, after the walk with Rebecca scene, I didn't think it was as much as I've said for the last hour and a half, Matt, that I loved the chemistry between these two characters. I just didn't think the breakup scene was that
Hmm.
impactful, and I guess they didn't really break up. But yeah, any other thoughts on episode 8, Matt?
The only other thought I have about episode 8 is, man, they spend a lot of time naked in Cyberpunk.
Yeah, they definitely do.
Hmm.
But Matt,
Hmm.
speaking about humanity, episode 9,
Hmm.
Lucy's captors learn about her secret mission and dark past. David and his team head out to complete Faraday's job, but realize something is off. Matt, we get the desert heist.
Yes.
We find out that, it was said earlier that Tanaka didn't actually have information worth stealing, but it turns out that Lucy just wanted to bury the information, how they wanted David to test the cyber skeleton.
Hmm.
But again, Matt, for me, this whole episode, I think what makes this episode is the desert heist. And I do like Falco. I feel like we didn't talk to him enough, but I really liked Falco as a character.
Yeah.
But Matt, I don't know. Episode 9 to me is really conflicting when I kind of think about it. So before I kind of go on my tirade, what did you think of episode 9?
I enjoyed episode 9. I think the fight scene towards the end was like really fun. I think the whole heist itself was really good. This had very Jared, this whole episode gave me really really heavy Fast and the Furious vibes.
Okay,
So
really?
I was like really into it. Like
Yeah.
you have Jared, you have a desert heist scene where they're like shooting harpoons to like trip cars. You're
Yeah.
fighting
Yeah,
with
yeah.
tanks. Towards the end, you're just doing some crazy like muscle man like bullshit essentially. Like tell me that you couldn't see Vin Diesel doing this in Fast 10.
This, I don't know. I've never watched like the Chronicles of Riddick, but if you told me this was the Chronicles of Riddick, I probably would have believed you.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
Okay, Matt, you sold me. Episode 9 is essentially Fast 10. Okay, I get you. I totally get you, Matt. But yeah, Matt, I think there were a few choice moments in this episode that I really liked. I think two or three things stick out to me. One, it was kind of David succumbing to, all the wares that he has installed in his body, hooked up to so many suppressants. I think that one scene where David has his jacket off and he asks Rebecca to get it for him, and then you see all of those suppressants like stuck or injected in his body, and he essentially looks like Bane at that point. I thought it was really gnarly. I thought Faraday using Lucy, like essentially deep faking Lucy to kind of convince David to install the cyber skeleton.
Oh yeah.
I'm actually surprised that this hasn't come up. Maybe it's because I'm 2 years out from playing 2077, but I don't remember instances of like deep fakes that, kind of in your face like that. So that really surprised me. But at the same time, really makes sense of, wow, you can really just plug like USB into someone and then just deep like mimic their voice. But Matt, towards the end, when Faraday is essentially gaslighting David, as David's on the brink of cyber psychosis, was crazy to me. But ultimately, by the end, David installs the cyber skeleton. It looks gnarly, really convenient that it has a self installation station inside them. But yeah, Matt, that installation of the cyber skeleton, of course, it's fitting because this episode is called Humanity. But Matt, I don't know. So I finished episode 9, and then going into the finale of Cyberpunk, I think what I was left with at the end of episode 9 is that, again, this is what I said before, but I feel like every piece of cyberpunk, cyborg, synthesis media, again, it always revolves around this idea of humanity and not being able to return to normal, to be able to return to normal, to your past life once you cross that line. It is a story literally at the root of this genre. And again, by the episode 9, it's the same question. How do you go back from this? And then I guess what really does it for me is the fact that David is the Hulk at this point, and Lucy never changes. She's still this petite girl. She's still the petite love interest that he's trying to save.
Mm-hmm.
And while I'm not trying to poo-poo it, at the same time, as big as a spectacle as episode 9 was, I was kind of just feeling unsatisfied by the end of it. I really enjoy the cutthroat nature of the story, all the double crossings. Like when Kiwi kind of turned her back on Lucy, I thought, man, that Kiwi, Matt.
Mm-hmm.
And again, how it's contrasted to that teenage love between the two protagonists compared to the cutthroat ruthlessness of all our antagonists, essentially. And then this is all against the backdrop of the hopelessness of Night City. Like all that as a package is really great, and I really loved it. But, while the story of trying to balance implants with your sense of self and gradually degrading was told really well throughout the first 2/3 of the story,
Mm-hmm.
with David installing the cyber skeleton, I feel like they just kicked it to 100 instantly, and it kind of went overboard. I thought the cyber skeleton, like, visually looked dumb just because it is just David's torso with all his robot parts.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, Matt. Like, at this point I was thinking, man, like, David has to die because he can't, like, I know he's talked in the beginning, oh, they can do the mind prison thing, but this is this is told in so many other, pieces of media that have the same themes. Like, once you're at this point, you have to die. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. That's why I felt kind of unsatisfied by the end of episode 9. But I was wondering if you had any similar thoughts or if you thought differently.
I wasn't unsatisfied by it, but like I definitely think that this episode seals David's fate as him dying next episode.
Yeah.
Once I finished episode 10 though, and I was like going through, I guess, my English rewatch.
Yeah.
Once I got to the end of this episode, I really thought, I don't know if I would have thought David would die if I didn't know that the show was only 10 episodes long.
Right.
I think if like, I didn't know it was 10 episodes long, like, and I'm just thinking, is this going to be like a 12 episode series? I think if episode 9 happened in a 12 episode series as episode 9, I think that there would have been potential for David to come out alive. I don't know if you
Okay.
feel the same way about that or not.
I think knowing that there was only 10 episodes and knowing that this was episode 9 kind of does color my judgment in a way. No, that's definitely a good point.
Mm-hmm.
But Matt, while we're here, episode 10, My Moon, My Man. On the edge of cyberpsychosis, but determined to save Lucy, David storms into Night City as Arasaka plots to deploy their ultimate lethal weapon.
Mm-hmm.
Matt,
Jaren?
my first note for this, that grapple hook headshot in the beginning was brutal, Matt. Like, that was wild. And honestly, we kind of know what happens, but I would have loved a Falco and Rebecca team up spinoff. Because their team up in the beginning, I actually really appreciated that scene where David is out of commission, and it is kind of relying on Falco's driving skills and, the trigger happiness of Rebecca, that I really liked it, just because I was so over super mech David at this point that anything more quote unquote grounded in the world of cyberpunk was well welcome to me. But I don't know. There were parts of this episode that I felt were kind of messy, mostly with Arasaka at least the two corpos not necessarily understanding what actually is happening, if you know what I mean, where they were kind of confused by all this chaos that was unfolding as well, where at some point I didn't even know if they knew that they were going to get Lucy out of all of this. And I feel like it was just confusing overall in that regards. But Matt, when during that car chase scene, or when they're being chased, and when David finally wakes up and then he's using all his anti-grav, super robot bullshit, and then it cuts to Rebecca kind of blasting her shotgun, that gave me such look, Dad, I'm helping energy. But I don't know, Matt, like, I think halfway through the episode, it was just really heartbreaking to see kind of David going in and out of, these flashbacks with his mother, the talk about him kind of of her wanting to see him make it to the top of Arasaka Tower.
Mm-hmm.
And then Matt,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that scene where, you know, at the end of the scene, for it to cut to a heartbroken realization for Becca to realize what's actually going on. Like, I thought that was just a good, you know, full circle moment with like the most vulnerable that we ever got to see Rebecca.
Yeah. Yeah.
But Matt,
Jaren.
when David is standing on top of Arasaka Tower and he says, "Mom, look, I'm on the top of the tower." Him, you know, admitting that he has nothing left as he peers over the edge with the full moon in the background. I think
Jaren.
that was such a great shot. Sorry, Matt, I'm just like word vomiting right now. Were there any moments, you know, before we get to the Atom Smasher stuff, which we covered in the beginning of the episode, were there any other standout moments kind of in the first 2/3 of episode 10?
No, I think the two moments that you mentioned of Rebecca kind of snapping David out of cyberpsychosis that last time, and David being at the top of Arasaka Tower are really, really just like strong scenes in this episode. Yeah. And those are also the ones that like stood out to me. Cause like, man, after this, Jaren, I think Cyberpunk goes full anime. Like,
it kind of passed you at this point, Matt.
Jaren, oh man.
Like, it was great, Matt. But other scenes that stood out to me, Lucy and David's kiss by the moonlight. David saying, "This was the only way I knew I could protect you from the city." Matt, this is cliche teenage romance bullshit, but I was eating out of it. Like, I've said it so many times. I hope you guys weren't taking shots when every time I mentioned how much I love the pairing, the chemistry between Lucy and David. But like, you know, this tragic Romeo and Juliet ending of them having to go their separate ways, and you know, David kind of admitting he's did everything for Lucy. I don't know, Matt. It was heart wrenching. But Matt,
Jaren.
What I think, and then of course we had Kiwi's kind of small redemption arc. But, you know, whatever. Actually, this was something that one of my friends brought up. But you know, throughout this whole series, we had such brutal kills, but for Rebecca and Kiwi's deaths, to him, these seemed a lot, you know, kind of tame compared to what we've seen, especially considering that they were not necessarily main characters, but major players throughout. I kind of did think, one, Kiwi's death was a bit underwhelming, but it kind of fit, you know, her own storyline. I don't know, Matt. Rebecca was done dirty for her just to be crushed like that.
Jared, I thought Rebecca was gonna make it out, man.
If any, Matt, I swore that Rebecca was going to be an NPC in like some DLC or something. Just to see her crushed instantly made me feel so bad, Matt.
Jared, the Rebecca, I guess, snapping David out of cyberpsychosis like earlier in the episode, and her kind of just giving those last words to Lucy before she like leaves the car. I thought, oh yeah, okay, cool. Rebecca's gonna make it out. She's gonna be the one that like tells David's story to everybody else while Lucy like goes off and does her own thing.
Yeah,
man, Jaren. Oh, man, this is like bad word choice. It's the only one I can think of. I was so crushed when Rebecca died.
Oh man, I don't know.
God.
I don't know. Matt. You did her dirty, Matt. Matt, Rebecca deserved a better anime.
God. Yeah. Oh man. I'm bummed, man.
But yeah, I think we went through all the Atom Smasher stuff in the beginning. I loved how once again he was portrayed. But yeah, Matt, what did you think of David's death? You know, playing alongside that montage of carnage, just going through all the different deaths, all of these bleak moments throughout Cyberpunk or throughout the Edgerunner or the previous 10 episodes of Edgerunners. Just because when I saw that play out, I thought that was well done. I loved how that was presented, mostly to me, because it kind of gave that feeling of, oh, yep, David is just another casualty of Night City. He, even though the whole, you know, there's this whole story plot point of David being special. At the end of the day, at the end of the series, he's just another dead body like the rest of them. And I don't know. I thought that was a really impactful way to send him out. And I was wondering what you
Hmm.
thought.
Yeah, the kind of just like unceremonious way that David just dies to basically just like a shotgun
Yeah.
blast to the head, I thought was very, very fitting to the overall tone of David's story
Yeah.
throughout the whole anime. And I thought that just like, I don't know, it really just made a lot of sense. I'm like glad he didn't do some kind of big, huge, extravagant
Yeah.
death. Like, oh, he tried to like self destruct or something in his like last hope to like make sure Adam Smasher doesn't get like Falco and Lucy.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, like I'm glad that his story ended the way it did, and it makes like a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah. He went out like he was supposed to go out, and yeah, I don't know. I thought it was fitting overall. But yeah, Matt, it
Hmm.
ends with Lucy on the moon, roll credits, at least Falco uh kind of lives on as well. I
Hmm.
think between the two, if Falco didn't live, I would definitely expect to see Lucy in like any DLC. But I don't know. I feel like Falco is the perfect like NPC to appear in like any DLC for Cyberpunk 2077 at this point,
Oh yeah, that makes
on
sense.
top of Lucy. But
Hmm.
yeah, Matt, I feel like we talked a lot about our overall impressions in the beginning, but after this beefy episode, after we went through all 10 episodes, what we liked, what we didn't like,
Uh huh.
how are you feeling about Edgerunners overall? And does this kind of make you excited about the upcoming DLC, which I believe is called Phantom Liberty for 2077?
Yeah, I'm really excited for that DLC. I'm definitely going to play it. I really want to jump into Cyberpunk now, but like I don't think that there's gonna be much for me to do other than check out, I don't know, the new guns and like the transmogs. So I don't want to like burn myself out on it before Phantom Liberty drops.
Mostly because
But
even though there
yeah.
was a patch recently for 2077, things
Hmm.
like I believe they're also going to introduce, an updated melee combat system. They're going to fix the police
Oh, that's good.
stuff. And then, yeah, we do have the DLC in Phantom Liberty, but I'm also wondering, okay, what else can they incorporate from Edge Runners into this world that we're used to for 2077, where
Hmm.
as much as I want to go back and play it just to kind of experience this world again, at the same time, there's still probably a better version of Cyberpunk and a more fleshed out version of Cyberpunk
Yeah.
down the road, whether it sometime in 2023 that I'm actually waiting for. As much as I want to kind of go back in the world, I think going back now won't scratch that itch just because for the most part, I believe Cyberpunk, aside from the bug fixes, will still be the Cyberpunk experience that I had, 2 years
Hmm.
ago. So yeah,
Hmm.
as much as I'm kind of excited for the DLC after, finally viewing the trailer for Phantom Liberty. Again, not much of it was, shown, but at the same time, V takes an oath to say she'll faithfully serve the new United States of America, while
Hmm.
Johnny Silverhand says that, oh, that was a bad idea, where I don't, to me, this kind of screams, hey, this is just like another, this is this plays out until you get to the end and you're choosing a new ending path, which branches off into the story content where I don't know, Matt, maybe I want something like what Grand Theft Auto 4 did with Tales from Liberty City and their DLC, where I do. I know we keep going back to this concept, but at this same time, after Edge Runners, I don't necessarily want to experience V's story again, but
Hmm.
I would love to see someone else's story being told, whether it be through a new Edge Runners series or DLC or a spin off like that. But
Hmm.
I think with me, yeah, by the end of Edge Runners, it's I want to go back into the Cyberpunk gameplay world. I don't necessarily want to re-experience V's story, but
Yeah.
that's kind of where I'm sitting right now. But first and foremost, I just want a more beefier game experience with all the improvements. But yeah, Matt, as I said in the beginning, I loved Edge Runners,
Hmm.
and And anything else that is on your mind?
Jaren, there's a video on YouTube with 240K views called "Killing Adam Smasher with Rebecca's Shotgun."
Oh man, that's so good, Matt. That's so good. I loved Edgerunners, Matt. I know some Nendoroids for David and Lucy were announced. I might pre-order that Lucy one, but I don't know, Matt. I feel like you have to release a Rebecca one at some point, and when that happens, day one pre-order for me, Matt. Day one. But Matt, my throat hurts. We've been talking a lot. This was the beefy episode, and Matt, I just want to thank you for sitting through this with me, re-exploring the anime, going through all 10 episodes and sharing our thoughts.
Yeah.
But yeah, just anything else you wanted to kind of, what's the final thing you want to stamp Edgerunners with?
I think Edgerunners is a great anime. If you haven't played the Cyberpunk game, I think that this is a really great introduction towards the series, and I guess Cyberpunk as a whole, because I feel like that's not a very well represented genre in terms of gaming or any kind of like real media.
I think in terms of mainstream media, definitely, but Cyberpunk as a whole, like, it does have its fans, but yeah, I think this is going to be a lot of, especially to casual viewers, a lot of people's kind of not necessarily first taste of, all the different concepts and stuff, but for this type of world, this dingy world, I think this will be a lot of people's introductions to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, Matt, beefy episode. All I want to say is, Matt, Rebecca deserved a better anime.
Yep,
she deserves her spin-off with Falco and their father-daughter relationship as she tries to avenge her big brother David and finds her long-lost sister Lucy. That should have happened, but it was crushed by Adam Smasher, that nobody I quick hacked at the end of 2077. I'm God. So mad right now. So Jaren, mad.
Jaren, her and Sasankwa need to meet up.
Oh man, Matt. But Matt, that was Edgerunners. This has been the Mistake Zone, and please take it away.
This has been the Mistake Zone, and we're all out of eddies.